Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is the first time you have dropped in on me. Today we're going to be doing my monthly deck reviews. So this is where I talk about all the decks I've been working with over the past month or so. And yeah, that's what we're doing. There might be some other stuff I've been working with over the past month or so, but this is kind of my opportunity to check in, chit chat about what I've been using, what's been in my practice, that kind of thing. Before I jump in, just a quick reminder that I am also a tarot deck creator and an author. I will throw up a quick infographic, like an animated image, so you can see where you can get my things. I promise I am working on getting Unicorn's Journey Oracle into my Etsy shop. It might even be in there by the time you see this video, but it might not be. Either way, I'm working on it. Hopefully I'll have that listed for you soon if you are interested. With that said though, let's get into what I have been working with in the month of November. So for starters, let's talk about my primary working decks for my own card pulls through the entire month. I don't know, well, I do know what happened. This is what I wanted to play with. But all through November, I was working with this particular combo of decks, the Earthwoman Tarot by Tarn Ellis and the Earth Song Oracle, also by Tarn Ellis. Although these are by two different publishers. This one is published by Lo Scarabeo, the tarot deck is, and the Oracle is a Rockpool publication. But oh my gosh, these are just the best. First of all, these are both mass market, and the readings experience with these has just been absolutely wonderful. I love this Earthwoman Tarot. It's cozy. It gives me all of the like November vibes, and I've just been having the kind of month where I wanted to keep it simple for my own practice, and this has just been really meeting me where I am. I feel like I pull a card from the Oracle, I pull a couple cards from the Tarot, and that's my daily reading, and it was everything I wanted. I had plans, like look at this Death card. I had plans to rotate my decks a bit more in November for my personal practice, but I just didn't end up doing it. I just kept wanting to work with this, so that's what I did. The thing about this deck is the women in the deck are faceless, which you would think, I would have thought, would have bothered me, but it just, I don't know, it didn't. It's just a whole mood. I loved the whole tone of it. It feels like fall to me. It feels like being in nature. There's something a little bit primal about it. It feels like deep feminine wisdom. That's totally Jason Momoa to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It just is. But I just, like, come on. It's so great. And it just made me feel good to work with it. I loved pulling the cards. I loved taking pictures of the cards. And when you see it next to the Earth Song Oracle, what I love about, this is my second copy of this deck because I purchased this, and you may remember when it first came in, when I purchased this, there was one single card that was cut wrong, and I was outside of the Amazon return window, and so I ended up not using this deck as much as I wanted to because one card stuck out funny, and so I bought another copy. But I have no regrets. Because the thing about this deck that I love, I'm normally a big color person. However, what's really great about this, particularly when it's sort of flanked by cards from the Earthwoman Tarot, is that this shows bits of nature with these divine feminine figures kind of like baked into what you're seeing. So here we see a divine feminine figure as part of the sun. Here it's like part of the seed. Here is part of the water. Here as the serpent. And I love that. I love that here as the air. It sort of brings us into this energy of Mother Earth, which I really, really think is just so nourishing and beautiful. And it just, like I said, kind of feels like this time of year. And I love the keywords. I love that you get a title, you get 3 keywords, and then you also have a little message. So here for tree, it says growth, life, established. And then it says reach for your full potential and focus on obtaining wisdom. For wildflower, we have unplanned joy and serendipity, and then it says remain open to unexpected joy. So it's just such an easy breezy deck to use. It does feel very permanently paired with the Earthwoman Tarot for me. And so this is a deck that I enjoy using in combination specifically with the Earthwoman Tarot, but I kept this with me throughout the month, and whenever I wanted to pull cards, this is just where I pulled from. If I wasn't working with something else for a specific purpose, it was working with these, and I just really enjoyed it. They're so permanently paired that I literally have them in like matching peggy bags, and they just hang together on the rack. They are a duo, and I love that about these. And it's funny because when I first saw them, I don't think these were ones that were like instantly grabbing me, partly because I have other like feminine wisdom decks, but I also have a tendency to reach for decks with more bold gem-tony colors. And so these ones felt a little out of the box for me, but they were just so perfect for November and my slower pace. I'm in a more a more contemplative energy at this time of the year. I slow down, I get more sleepy and like lower energy, and decks like this just feel very soothing to work with. I also really like working with Three Trees tarot decks at this time of year. They just feel cozy. They kind of meet you where you are. And these are that for me. And I just, again, I thought I was going to rotate. I just didn't rotate. I just worked with these. That's just how it went. When it came to readings for my members, I decided to do a little experiment and work with basically just with pip decks, although each had a very different vibe. So we're going to go through these one at a time, and I'm going to tell you kind of what my experience was like with them. But these were the selection of decks I had available for members for me to read with. The first one I had available is the Queer Crow Death Magic Tarot. Now, this is an older edition. It's not the most recent Kickstarter edition, but I think this is the first edition of the deck. And so it had like a guidebook in it, which, to be fair, I have not spent any time with. But the cards themselves, other than being a little bit big and difficult, a little more difficult to shuffle. Like, it's a nice card stock. I think it's just that it's quite a big deck, and that made it a little trickier to work with. But I did really enjoy working with this. I will admit that this one fell a little more flat for me than some of the other pip decks I was working with. But I do really like it. It's very different, and the energy is quite bold. I think, honestly, when it came to reading day, the only real deterrent I had about working with this deck was the fact that the deck was so large. And when I'm doing my member readings day, I'm on doing readings for usually at least 6 hours. And I think I was on for about 8 in November. And so throughout the day, these bigger, chunkier decks just start to wear on my hands a little bit with all the shuffling. So I wasn't reaching for it as much as I wanted. Some of the middle of suit pips throw me a little bit. Like, these fours feel very four-ish with their pip arrangement. But there's a couple cards that... I'm not going to be able to find any of them now. Yeah, here's one. Okay, so this is the Four of Wands, and this is the Two of Wands. And I can see when I slow down that these are very different situations. Like, this is like kind of like a Bridget's Cross situation here. Whereas here we have sort of two interwoven, and there's like roots coming out one end and growth out of the other end. So they're very different like shapes and happenings. But at a glance, being that they're a similar color and being that they're in the same suit, the 2 and the 4 can feel very similar. That might be the only place I ran into that. But for the most part, I'm really drawn to these like sort of bold colors, stripped back imagery. I like the vibe, and it's very much pips with a purpose. So if you're somebody that likes pips because they're sort of stripped back, they're less people-y, but you want something that feels purposeful, I feel like this does that very well. Like, here we have the Six of Swords. This is clearly a Six of Swords, but it's very stripped back. You know, you get the feeling of what does Nine of Wands kind of feel like, right? There's some really cool imagery happening in this deck. I don't ultimately know what its long-term potential in my collection was going to be, but I would say this is the one that I enjoyed. If I was ranking them, this one would have came in last out of the pip decks that I worked with in my member readings. Not because it's a bad deck, just because I tended to gravitate towards the others more. But it is a really cool deck, and it's one that's been a lot of fun to play with. So that is the Queer Crow Death Magic Tarot. So I played with that. And then I also played with, speaking of things that are, I think, more outside of my personal wheelhouse, the Mellow Schema Tarot. I was really surprised how well this read for me, and the jury's still out on how much of that for me is novelty value, because it's something so different than what I usually work with, and how much of it is me being absolutely just enchanted by the little subtle foiling and details on these cards, because I just could not shut up about them the whole time. I still can't get them to quite show up on camera, and it drives me crazy. Oh, there we go. You can see it. Some of them I can get it to show. It just depends on if I can get the light to hit them just right. But there's something about the flow of light and detail and design on these that somehow I feel like they're talking to me when I use them, even though it's very, very stripped back. Choice of color, the flow of line work, what's happening visually on the card, where the little sparkles of light are with these like foil accents. All of this sort of lends itself to the experience in a really unique way. But again, I don't know. It's really hard to tell at this point. Is this just like new relationship energy, like with this deck? Like, am I just like having a heyday with it because it's so different? I don't know, but it's a design marvel to me. And this is not, my brain doesn't work this way typically. And so I'm very impressed by and have a lot of respect for people who create things that do what this does. I just think it's very clever. Like, here's our Page of Swords. I definitely would not recommend this deck to a tarot beginner. But that being said, in fact, let's go back to that Page of Swords, actually. Because the guidebook, I think, if I recall correctly, does a good job. Well, now when I'm reading for my members, I don't get into the guidebook, so I don't have the benefit of that. But let's go into Page of Swords real quick. So here it says, the Page of Swords arrives with the flicker of a new idea. This card speaks to the bright energy of curiosity and a sharp awareness just beginning to stretch in the air. So it's like, this is the known space of the page, and then this is the direction it's stretching in, and it's going all the way off the border of the card, right? It says a soft openness fills the space. Oh, sorry. Let me go back up. Just beginning to stretch in the air. Something within you is catching the wind and looking around, eager to learn what is possible. A soft openness fills the space, lightness in the sky. From the border of the scene, a single sword shoots upward, breaking past the frame as if leaping beyond fixed thought and reaching toward uncharted space. Light circles roll gently through the air like the thoughts juggling and tumbling into motion. Everything tilts with a playful eagerness as if they are wanting to try something interesting. This card invites you to think freely and stay curious. Follow the trail of wonder and allow yourself to experiment even without knowing exactly where it leads. Let your thoughts move lightly and listen closely for what makes your inner mind lean in. You may be surprised where this wind of energy takes you, especially if you allow the flow you inspired to spark something new. So it makes sense. Like, I was able to pick up on like what's happening there, and it makes sense when you read in the guidebook what is happening here. And if we pick another that's a little out of the box here, obviously here's the Four of Swords. So we have 3 neatly lined up and we have 1 upright. And this says, the Four of Swords offers a moment to step back and rest. It suggests that the mind and heart find shelter and in stillness. This card speaks to the gentle space of pause where thoughts settle and healing begins. 3 swords rest in unison, their sharp edges softened as they lie together in quiet balance. A single blade stands apart above them, its point facing gently into the air through a veil of diffused light. Together they form a composition of quiet harmony and rest. Colors drift and dissolve like mist across the surface, softening what once felt tense or strained. The air seems to breathe around them, a calm current that invites the mind to settle in the muted light. The swords settle into silent refuge. This card invites you to let yourself be held by pause. Step back from noise and let silence be your companion. In this soft space, you may find renewal that asks for nothing and offers everything. Trust that rest is part of the path forward, that quiet reflection can be a foundation for what comes next. Let this pause cradle you, a space where your thoughts can settle and the heart can find its own gentle rhythm. It's just really lovely and calming, and you can tell by the tenor of the entries that the guidebook entries are also written that way. There's just something very different about this that just keeps making me go, oh, it's so interesting. But I still can't decide. Is it interesting because it's different? Or is it calling me because it's something I'm going to go, man, I'm in the mood for this, so I'm going to reach for this deck. And that is, again, something that only time will tell. But it was really fun to read with this, and I did enjoy it reading for members. I found it read surprisingly easily, despite its minimalism. Another deck that I really enjoyed working with is the Flight of the Butterfly Tarot. Man, this was a lot of fun too. And it was another one that I was reading without the guidebook. And it's always a good test for me to see how does this deck work if I'm not relying on guidebook entries to kind of see me through. And this deck has a whole layer of the relationship between Psyche and Eros, I think it is. Let me see. Yeah, Psyche and Eros. I just had to remind myself. So there's a bunch of that going on. But I actually found that a lot of times it was the butterfly and caterpillar type imagery when I saw cocoons, what was happening on the card. There was a lot happening that I could work with. This is another one though where, man, I love how vivid and bold and colorful all the imagery is. It's one where as I was reading with it, reflecting on the life cycle of a butterfly / caterpillar and like where it was and what was happening, it kind of added itself to the reading. And I did find myself sort of searching the image for clues and for hints at what was going on and really enjoying that process. But again, I don't know. These are all decks that, so far, these are all decks that I just don't know what their long-term status is going to be for me. But they were a lot of fun to play with. And I would say I enjoyed this. Visually, this gave me more to work with than Mellow Schema or Queer Crow Death Magic Tarot. So for that, it was a lot of fun. And I do really love the colors. It was an interesting challenge doing all these readings just with decks like this that were a little either more abstract or more minimalist in their style. And it was fun to do that in November for sure. And I would definitely challenge you, if you've got decks like this in your collection that you don't, maybe they feel a little bit like they push you as far as your comfort level, your comfort zone for what kind of decks you tend to read with. But pull those decks out and put them through the paces and see, because it will teach you about your relationship with that deck. Even if it's just temporary, like, hey, I'm not sure right now. It's a fun way to see, is this something that you think is going to really stand the test of time? So the Cracked Amethyst Tarot, this was also just tons of fun. And if I had to pick the one that I probably enjoyed reaching for the most, I'm pretty sure it was this one. I really enjoy this style of art. I love this Temperance card. I did struggle with some of these arrows. So we should talk about it. I think it was the court cards in the arrows that I was like, wait, what? They're all the same. But let me just pull them, because that's the only place I really ultimately struggled, I believe, with this deck. And I've been waiting this one a long time. So it's definitely, yeah, here's one. So this one's hard to see actually in the light in here. Okay, yeah, so that is the Ace of Arrows. And so it's like an arrow kind of landing and planting itself. But then here's the Page of Arrows. And I had to really think about it by putting these cards side by side to kind of get what was happening. I love this Emperor card so much. It reminds me of Mount Rainier. But here's the King of Arrows. So we have an arrow pointing down and there's lots of fire. And then here's, oh, no, not that one. Here's the Queen of Arrows. So it took me a minute, right, sitting with these. And I want to find the Knight too, because I'm pretty sure the Knight is also literally just like an arrow sticking down into the ground. I love this Hermit card. And like the same thing happens, I believe, with the swords a little bit. But for me, the arrows kind of trip me up. Because when I was looking at them individually, I wasn't sure what they were telling me. When you see them together, it becomes a lot clearer, which I'll point out here. I also really love that Two of Swords. Hello? Are we going to ever find... Oh, it's one of my favorite Six of Cups ever. I'm not going to be able to find... Here's the Knight. And there's the Knight of Arrows. So we have the Ace of Arrows. And here we have an ace kind of going down into the ground, and right where it's landing, there's like this new little burst of growth in the ground, right? Then you have the Page of Arrows where it's stuck in the ground and there's a bit of growth coming up. Then you have the Knight of Arrows where now the field it's in, like you can see, like this was like a desert. Now it's all full of growth, and now there's all this like feathers, all this extra like airy energy going on. And then we have the Queen, and now there's flowers. And then you have the King and there's fire. But there's also time of day happening here. So we have like sunrise, midday, sunset, and night. So you get these different times of day perspectives as well. And you can see the trajectory of what's happening. But when I was just pulling a random card, and I want to say it was this one. It was like the Page. I was like, okay. It took me a second. It kind of broke the immersion of the deck, I guess, because I had to stop and sort of really think about this arrow stuck in the ground. And so there's a couple areas where Cracked Amethyst, which I wouldn't call a pip deck, really. It's definitely, though, a more minimalist deck, because it's relying on no figures, no interactions between people. I love this Nine of Cups as well. It's a very cozy deck, but it did give me pause once or twice. That said, it was the clear winner for me as far as just being fun to play with. And then always during my member readings, I also always have my Unicorn's Journey Tarot, my Unicorn's Journey Oracle, Sassy Dragons, Classic and Not Safe for Work. So I had those as well, and they always get requested, so I'm always working with those. But as far as things that for me were being experimented with, this was among them. I really enjoy this deck. I think that I need more time to sort of play and bond. It's one of those things where you build up a bit of a hype in your head, because I've been wanting the Idiosyncra deck for so long. And now I have this, and I want to have time to sort of build relationship with it. But the Oracle deck that I decided to pair with these is this one. And again, it was a situation of wanting to test it and see, does this even like work for me? And it actually was a really beautiful deck to read with. I really enjoyed the messages. The art is not necessarily my go-to, but setting the guidebook aside and taking it just at face value, The messages in this are very healing focused, and it did look really beautiful, especially next to Flight of the Butterfly Tarot, but it looked great next to all of these decks, which was a testament, I think, to it being sort of a dynamic art style. And even though it says Inner Child Oracle, I think that it's kind of like a general healing oracle as well. Like speak to yourself with kindness, become aware of how you speak to yourself. Spend time in nature, let the beauty of nature refresh your soul. I don't love cards like this because speak to yourself with kindness. I feel like there's so many ways I can interpret that as a reader. Spend time in nature feels like go do this thing. And it's very specific. But a lot of these themes were really great. Just cultivating an air of celebration. You are wanted. Look back on your childhood. Seek guidance. I think that be true to who you are. There were some really fun themes and I did enjoy working with it. I'm still struggling with if this is ultimately a deck that I feel like I can bond with enough to have it remain in my collection. And I think that if I was going just based on my experiences in November with these, even though this worked just fine, I'm struggling to think of myself reaching for it again. And I would say that is also true of Queer Crow Death Magic. And so I think where I'm sitting with this, just kind of thinking about and trying to be mindful because I'm just finishing filming my collection series, which is going to be rolling out throughout the month, the last few videos. So I want to be mindful. Cracked Amethyst is clearly still safe. Flight of the Butterfly Tarot, I also need more time with, I think. And I'd like to spend some time with the Psyche Eros story and see if that changes how I feel about this deck and how it works for me. And Mellow Schema Tarot is just one of those things where I just can't tell. And I'm going to have to see if it just sits and sits and I don't feel the need to reach for it over time. So these three are in very much maybe categories, although Cracked Amethyst is probably going to remain safe over the long term because I know myself and I love this art style. And so it's one that I think I will reach for when I want something that's a little bit more stripped back. These two I think might be more novelty value for me, but I won't know till I've really spent time with them over time. So I have to just wait and see. Like, do I ever think of them? Do they kind of fall out of my attention? So we'll see. But I do think these two, Queer Crow Death Magic and Inner Child, are probably going to, I'm just going to probably put them in purgatory temporarily and just see if I miss them, if I think about them, if I remember them. So kind of trying to be mindful as I go. Some other things that I worked with and did in November. I have not been reading my fiction book. I'm so paused in the Fourth Wing series. I have this like thing where I just haven't been reaching for fiction at all in the past like couple months, really. So, and I think it's because I don't want to finish the Fourth Wing series. I literally think that's what's happening. I'm so attached to the characters. I don't want to stop. I'm attached. I don't want them to go anywhere. And I know there's no book after the third book. So I've just been dragging my feet with Onyx Storm, and it's just a thing. But I did play a couple of solo role-playing games. So I played this one. This one is called Dwelling, and this one I did not use any cards with. And this is designed, I don't want to spoiler you, but I will say the way that it's designed is that you sort of go through, you read this story, and as you're reading the story, you're sort of exploring different rooms. And one of the things it suggests is that you actually like draw, mark in the book. You also mark yourself, all this kind of stuff. So I actually printed out, they give you a digital download with this typically. And so it gave you like these room pages that you could just print. So I printed them on this like smaller size. And I did my doodling here. So like here's a little ghosty type creature that I drew for myself right there. So I did that instead of drawing in the book. And I just tucked it into the pages. And then when I got to a section of the book where you had to have like, it would say you remember something, so you'd write a little memory. Instead of doing like long form journaling, I just took out these little pieces of paper and jotted a little memory. So I'd have, wherever I was in the story, I would tuck in my little drawing of whatever I like saw, and then a little memory or whatever that I stumbled into. And so I just tucked these papers in. So all the way through are these like little tucked in like papers and like doodle pages of mine, all this kind of stuff. It was fun. I don't think it was as fun as any of the other role-playing games I played, though, and I would not play it again. It just felt, the best way I know how to express it is, for me, this felt a little bit like, I don't know, like it was trying too hard to be deep. And so, and I also felt like I did not get the resolution I wanted from the story. It felt a little open-ended, a little bit like a dangling story. I don't know if you've ever read, like, if you've ever read a book, and this is something you're co-creating with, like as a solo role-playing game, you're kind of co-creating it. And I felt like I was I was co-creating it, and even with me co-creating it, it dangled. I didn't get closure. Like, it didn't feel like I really, in the end, really understood what was happening long term. By the end of it, it didn't feel as satisfying as the other solo role-playing games I've played through. I didn't feel like I told this story that's very cohesive. Some story bits did come through. Like, I ended up, it's kind of interesting to kind of see where these sorts of things take you. It took me to a place for sure, and I ended up telling a bit of a story, but I didn't get the resolution. It didn't have the kind of prompts that led me to the resolution that I was hoping for. So yeah, I don't think I would play this one again, but it was fun to go through. So that one I probably won't be keeping. I also finally got around to, you can see it's kind of beat up, I finally got around to playing my print and played version of Anamnesis. I actually kickstarted this one. This was a lot of fun. Like, what the heck? Let me grab my little book. So this is the book that I've been using to like journal in for any like role-playing game stuff I've been doing. So I had my game of Corco in here. I have my vampire game in here. I thought I was going to play Dwelling in here, but I ended up just playing it in the book like I showed you. This is my Anamnesis game rather. And so this is a tarot game where you are basically trying to remember who you are. And this was surprisingly easy and surprisingly fun. So if this is one you're thinking about, it's the least glamorous one I have to show you because it's the only one I think I just straight up printed. But it's really easy, really repeatable. And I just kept my, I started to play and then I had to start over because I had messed up some of the basic instructions. But this was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun. I cannot remember, like it was pretty easy. I just kept my entries fairly short, but the way that this works is, and I played it with I used the Labanco Tarot, which I'm going to talk about. This is actually going to show up in my December recent deck roundup because I purchased this, but I really wanted to just play with it in story and it ended up being like the perfect thing for this game. But essentially how this game works is you begin as somebody who's just woken up and doesn't know who they are. So you essentially start out by creating a little mini deck, and you're going to do an act for each suit. So there's going to be, you sort of start out with a shadow card, which is drawn from the major arcana, and that's kind of a hint about who you actually were in your past. And my shadow card in this playthrough was the Chariot. And so then what you do is you go into Act 1, and this shouldn't be really spoiling anything because it doesn't really tell you. But in the beginning, it says, when you're ready, take a deep breath and wake up. And then Act 1, it says, you wake up in an unfamiliar place, seemingly within a town or city. You cannot remember who you are or why you're here. All you know for certain is that you are not in your home. And so you draw 3 cards from your deck of pentacles. So you've separated the deck out into its various suits. And then, I believe, because you also pull out so after you read your prompt, so you pull your card for your prompt, and then after you read, you draw a major arcana card. And that will represent somebody you spoke with or the topic of conversation. So you kind of combine the two. So for example, my Act 1, which is you start out in the Pentacles. I drew the Page and the Empress. So I wrote, I awake confused, where am I? The room is unfamiliar, but well appointed. I rub the sleep out of my eyes and slowly step out of bed and stretch. There are some clothes draped over a chair. They seem familiar. As I pull the dress over my head, a familiar fragrance envelops me, and I see a face, familiar and warm. Long brown hair, kind brown eyes, and a feeling of warmth and safety. Is she my mother? She feels like it. Is or was this her dress? And then, so then you go into... So you do that for multiple cards. So then I pulled the Knight of Pentacles and the Emperor, then the 6 and the Wheel of Fortune. And all these things kind of prompt different memories. It felt so easy to tell a story. I don't know how to describe it, but like I wrote pretty like short entries. Something feels off, like it's missing. I don't know if this plan I had to move to Paris was one I planned to do alone or with someone else. Did I have someone, a friend, a lover? Not that stranger at the hotel, but a real lover. And like just interesting things. So by the end though, I had a resolution to my story. And so you kind of have a final resolution where you work with your original card that tells you who you were. You can kind of go back to that person or you can step into somebody new. It was such an interesting way to engage with the cards. And it was really, like I said, very easy to play, very easy to flow through. I would say as far as like an easy solo game to play with tarot, this has been probably my favorite for just how easy it was. I really wish I had a physical copy because look how curled, look how messed up this one is. But this was a lot of fun. And it reminded me, as far as ease of play, the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, which is to date one of my very, very favorites for journaling games. It's just very easy. It flows. You tell a story. You don't need to write like big, long entries to feel like you're participating in the story. It's very simple and streamlined. Anyway, this was a lot of fun. Highly recommend. I will definitely play this one again. But I played it with the Lubanco because I wanted an opportunity to sort of like kind of bond with the artwork a little bit. And I love that I did that for myself. Because actually, I had talked myself out of this deck and then got talked back into it. And I think it happened during my member readings, actually. We were talking about it and people were like, it's really unique. And there's really only a handful of cards that I'm not as fond of. And even then, I found my way. Like this one is like one that, these kind of weird creatures, but there's a certain chaos to the Wheel of Fortune, a sort of unfamiliarity and being thrust into what you no longer recognize that I think works really well there. I feel like there's some extra cards, and I think I shuffled them all in for the purpose of the solo game, so now I have to find them and pull them out again. Hold on. The Devil is one of those cards that sometimes people don't like, but I don't mind it, actually. I kind of like it. This Tower is very, like, sort of sci-fi. But I would say for a game to play with Anamnesis, this one was a lot of fun because the imagery is unique enough and out of the box enough that I feel like it made me think about it more when I was pulling cards for the prompts. And I love that. I really do like this Chariot card too. And that Six of Cups. As a reader, this is very interesting. There's a lot going on here that I really enjoy. Okay, yeah, so I think that's the Lover's card that I like. I need to find the ones. There's like a 2 women lovers card. I'm not going to show it because some of these cards are a little bit racy for what YouTube seems to like. The Spaceship Vibes of Judgment kind of crack me up. It reads like spaceship vibes to me. It's not necessarily meant to be spaceship. But I did work with the guidebook, like read the guidebook entries a little bit here and there as I was working through Anamnesis. And I have to tell you, oh my gosh, the guidebook reads really well in this deck. I think it's really powerfully written. I think it's like succinct. Oh, see, I have like a advertising card mixed in here. And there are my Rejected Lovers cards. So I think these were meant to be in the bottom. But anyway, very, very cool deck. Really glad I purchased it. You'll probably be hearing me talk about it more in the future. I'm going to have to find a bag for it. But that is the... Hello? You need to go in the bottom. I don't like these like little... I mean, do I though? Maybe they're fine. Maybe I'm just being picky. I mean, like, they work fine. They're just so... Look how far back the card goes, though. Like, it goes back that far. I don't know. I just don't think these little cardboard card stands are very practical. But maybe I'm a card stand snob. I don't know. But anyway, this was so much fun. This book, though, there's a lot going on in here. And again, you're going to hear me talk about this again during my recent deck roundup, because it did technically come in during November, but I had to play with it, so I played with it. So that is everything that I worked with in November. Like I said, for my personal practice, it's pretty straightforward. I did also still work with my current Sunday practice decks, which are still the Tarot of Light, the Deck of Holy Souls, Tarot of Her. Those are my 3 Sunday practice decks. My bedtime pulls are still my Unicorn Tarot and Unicorn's Journey or Creative Consciousness Healing. Those are what I'm working with. And I'm sorry I didn't bring them over to show, but they haven't really been changing much. So you can look at my past monthly deck reviews to hear my thoughts on those. But that is it. Thank you so much for hanging out. As always, extra big thank you goes out to my Unicorn Fam channel members. Thank you so much for your support of the channel and of my work here. It really means the world. I appreciate you all. And for everybody watching, thank you so much for participating. Thank you for engaging here on YouTube. Your like, your comment, your shares, your hypes, all that stuff. It really helps the channel, so I appreciate it so much. I've learned a little bit more about hyping. It doesn't seem, I don't know that it does anything with the algorithm. I haven't discovered that yet. You can get on some leaderboard, which will never happen because this is a small community and whatever. I think it just tells YouTube that you like the video. I don't know. But you can only hype in the first 7 days. So if you're watching this after 7 days, you won't have that as an option. Anyway, thank you so much, you all. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.